Hello, Neil from Diagonal Move here, back with Cataclysm, a Second World War. It's the start of the 1937 turn, and I think it's fair to say that the build-up to the Second World War has been quite gradual in this particular playthrough. The tension has been bubbling under very much potential rather than actual conflict. Whether that actual conflict is starting to be realised now as the Japanese in the Pacific map on the right-hand side here have been trying but failing miserably to make military inroads into the Chinese, the now communist Chinese state. The fascist powers are now all at rearmament, and the Germans have started to expand their territory into Scandinavia with control now of Denmark and Sweden. The Italians are still bubbling under, doing their thing in their own way. There's still just the one resource. They're a little bit limited in what they can do as a result of that, and really the aim for the Italians is to try and get that second resource and also to ally with Germany. There's no reason why we shouldn't ally with Germany now, because the status quo special rules that were preventing so much of the democracy political manoeuvring in the last couple of turns has now gone, and that means it's really worthwhile for the fascist powers to start to ally really before the allies can, or the future allies can. That rule, that special rule around the status quo, was also the reason why I pulled too many resources for the British in particular in the last turn, and now that rule does not apply. Everybody on the Allied side gets their full resources, and everybody gets a flag as well. The Communists are remilitarizing. They do still have supply issues around the Urals, which is this bit here where they need to build the Trans-Siberian Railway, but they're much more politically free now that they've moved out of the military reform posture and can gain that flag, and can also start to do things a little bit more freely than they could before. The Americans, though, they are now at rearmament. They have a whole bunch of stuff to build and finally put their resources to some use, but they cannot join any future alliance until they bring in the Lend-Lease agreement, and also somehow get rid of that Japanese Washington Naval Treaty, which means there's no real naval activity of any kind over on the Pacific map, and also come up with a way of removing that resource transfer to the Japanese power that also is ongoing at the moment. As with the previous turn, I've sped things up slightly by pre-gaining all the resources for the production phase prior to the video, and we now need to think about builds. Regarding the Japan-US trade, I've just realised something I probably could have done is I could use, well, I couldn't actually because I didn't have the flags, but now that I've got the flags, the Americans can try to remove the resource there from Japan through a political action, which will be a provocation, but it will at least prevent some of the inevitable expansion, or the speed of expansion of the Japanese side. Nothing they can do about the naval treaty. That is entirely up to the Japanese prior to there being the outbreak of warfare. Okay, I think I've covered everybody. All we need to do then is start thinking about what we're going to do with the builds, popping everything into the cup for the start of the turn. Okay, with the US, they have a stack of resources. It's now a 1-to-1 build ratio for builds to resources, and with that in mind, let's get ourselves as much as we possibly can. Those units there should all be on their unupgraded side, but we will do a couple of fleets which will cost us 4 resources, and that will have to go on to the next turn, getting ourselves geared up ready for the almost inevitable Japanese advance in the Pacific region. They will go on to the 39-40 turn. The final 3 resources then, let's spend 1 each on the upgrade markers, and the final one we'll use for an air force, I think. Not in a, yeah, no, the land army. Let's do it with the land army. Okay, that's all our resources spent. The flag that they gained this turn will go onto the reserve, everything else into the cup. The French, they are the only power now still at their civilian status, but they do have a flag left over from the previous turn. 2 resources available, can't do anything with those, so they're going to have to become offensives, and they did get that flag this time, so they really now need to start to get themselves up to rearmament and also get aligned using all that potential there for DRMs as well. So those 4 counters, 3 of them will go straight into the cup with the flag going on the reserve. Britain, again, they're at rearmament. Oh no, they're still a civilian, my goodness, they need to upgrade and ally as well, so the flag will go onto the track there and into the cup. There's nothing they can build until they get themselves to rearmament. Really, that's a kind of a poor example of what the British can do, to be quite honest. They're not rearming already at this point because they're going to get left behind if they're not careful, but at least the Americans are at rearmament when they can finally come into the war. So a whole bunch of stuff goes into the cup for the British. Most of those offensives right now can't be used for very much by the Allies because until they're belligerent, they can't really attack anybody with any real ease, and there's all sorts of penalties if they try to. I mean, it's possible, but it's a case of, is it worth doing? So what they would typically do with them is support the various civil wars that go on in the game, but the civil war in China is finished and there's no other civil war on the map at the moment. They just haven't appeared, so it's all a bit limited there until the outbreak of war. Okay, the Russians have 2 resources and 2 flags. The flag will go on the political track. Their effectiveness returns to normal, should have done that last turn, and their two builds will be spent, one on an upgrade marker for future tank armies, and the final one for the a new land army. Getting ready for conflict as well. Let's do Germany. Germany don't have a huge number of resources. They could take the temporary resources in the Ruhr and in Sweden, but really what we want to do is wait until we can get the most bang for our buck with those and take them either at mobilisation or the total war commitment levels. So at the moment we just have those 2. We will spend one of those resources for an upgrade marker, and the other one will go on an Air Force marker. We're really lacking in Air Force, actually. I just realised that for the Germans. So the resources will go back to available, and the various other bits and bobs will go into the cup with one of their now 3 flags going into reserve. It's 3 because they get 2 each turn, and there was 1 left over from the last turn. Japan, 3 resources and 2 flags. The flag will go on the track, with the other one going into the cup. Those 3 resources, though, I kind of want to put those in as until we get rid of the naval treaty marker, which we will do this turn. We really can't do much in the Pacific, but it's worth spending 2 of those resources on a fleet ready for next turn, and the final one we will use into the cup for an offensive. Only people left then is Italy. Il Duce will go into the relevant reserve box, the flag will go into the cup, and the resource will go on the Air Force. Cool. Okay, that's that done. Let's pull the first chit and go from there. But of course I have forgotten again that the game can start with the option to interrupt, and what we'll do in terms of the interrupt is we will try and get the fascist powers allied. Now the stressor front is still there in the fascist status box for the political track, which means we cannot declare operations or attempt diplomacy in each other's areas of interest. However, the counter is removed once either the UK and France become allied or Germany and Italy become allied. Therefore, it would make sense with Il Duce there in the reserve box to do the interrupt. To attempt an alliance, we would have to use the Italians' effectiveness rating of 1, but the Il Duce flag that one there with the Mussolini on it, that allows you to roll 2 dice instead of 1, and those counters will go back to available, and we'll roll those dice. So 2 fascist dice, and we have 5s. There is now an alliance between the Germans and the Italians, so the stressor front is removed out of the game, and we do the alliance. Now that means they can operate in each other's area of interest, they can share territory in terms of moving units around and things like that. So it's a big benefit, and of course if one side declares war, both sides will be involved in the war. It's probably the main thing. Okay, cool. Let's get some cubes to show that those two sides are in an alliance. Now that allows the communists and the democratic powers to, what's the phrase, they allow them to interrupt as well. One thing I do need to check before I dive into the next thought is whether or not the alliance is a provocation, and it is. So it's a provocation where it's indicated on the status card. So Italy and Germany have formed an alliance, meaning we have a provocation against the British, French and Soviets. Okay, so that is basically everybody who's not fascist, isn't it? The French, though, cannot gain a new flag because they've already got theirs out, but the British and the Soviets do, both of which will go into the cup in this instance. So do we want to do the same as the British and French? I mean, there is the option, of course, for the communists to interrupt as well. I'm just thinking whether that's sensible with that political flag that they've got there. What could they do? They could increase their commitment again, but that would be pretty, hardcore. They can't ever ally with anybody. They could do a military action. Not sure who they'd do it to, although I think it might be worth trying actually to do a military, a diplomacy. And the reason is we need to get some VPs up on the board for the communists. We've already got 2, but that's really nowhere near enough, and it would give us an early opportunity to benefit from the DRM that the collective security posture gives us. It gives us a +1 to our, no it doesn't, sorry, it negates the -1 to a diplomacy action, but the fact that we are what supported the side that won the Chinese Civil War means we can get a +1 there, because the Communist Chinese army are there and would basically support what we're doing. So let's try that. Let's interrupt. We'll need to roll 2 dice to see if that is effective. We've got a 6. I think we're good. Pretty sure we're good. The reason we can do that, whereas I mentioned in a previous video that the Japanese couldn't at one point, and that's because the Chinese Civil War is inactive. If the Chinese Civil War was active, we couldn't attempt diplomacy in a region where there is an army. But for now, we have successfully gained ourselves a VP for the Soviet Union. And what that's going to allow us to do is going to allow us now to focus more on other political acts that we might want to do, which is, for example, the Urals, Trans-Siberian Railway through the Urals, things like that. Okay, and I need to find a cube for that and adjust the VP track. So the VP track's adjusted. The communists now have diplomatic control in another province of China. That is not a provocation because there's no one in the area of interest, although ordinarily if they were in an area of interest, that would be a provocation to whoever's nearby. Okay. Um, the Allies can now interrupt. There's a definite need, I think, to go to rearmament by the British and the French. So I think the British will attempt rearmament rather than lie, because we have got some political capital now. So that will come out eventually. So the British are going to try to rearm. May not be the best thing from the French players' point of view, but that's what we're going to do. We've got a failed die and a 5. Okay. Oh, good question. Does that count if I had to re-roll it? I'll count it. Cool. Benefit of playing solo. You don't have to worry about what everybody else may think. Cool. Okay. So the British are moving up to rearmament. They are now going to have an additional 3 forces. Okay. So I'll give the British 2 air force and a land army. The Japanese could now interrupt. What would they do? Because they're quite, I would imagine, unhappy about the growing Soviet interest in China, and also the absolute lack of resources coming their way from them several attempts at conquering China. But I think we'll hold that political capital in reserve for now as the Japanese. There's no need to tinker with our stability or anything like that. So, and there is a possibility for a military action. Who would we do the action against? Don't know right now. Okay, let's just go straight to the next chit, or even the first chit. Okay, the Americans have an upgrade marker. We can't really do much with the upgrade markers right now, but we can, of course, just flip a counter over, get ready for the future. There we go. We have a tank army in the American mainland, which is not very helpful to anyone right now, but it's there when the time comes. No interrupts, I don't think, therefore. Next chit is the French home front. The French being at civilian means that is not performed at this point. Home front goes on the turn track for the next year. No interrupts, therefore. We have the British home front next. Now that will take place. That will be 2 dice, aiming to get 5+. Worth noting, and I don't know if I've mentioned this in previous videos, but as you go more and more towards the right on these commitment tracks, in terms of your effectiveness and your ability to build things, you actually have a negative die roll modifier on your home front tests, because you're spending so much money on your military economy and nothing else. So we're okay at the moment. There's no DRM at the moment, but there will be when we all move to mobilisation. But let's just see what the British do. And they're okay, that's fine. Okay, they're all right. Next chip. And that's a crisis marker. Okay, first of our 4 crisis markers. This time we will be rolling a 5-2. It's peacetime again, or still. And that means a 5-2 military agitation. This is impacting Japan, and essentially Japan's effectiveness is reduced by 1. Wow, that's bad for the Japanese. Okay. Okay, the Japanese are rolling 1 die for the rest of the game whenever an effectiveness check is needed. That's going to be problematic for their political manoeuvring and their home front test. Okay, next counter. Actually, yeah, let's just do the next counter. Italian home front, so same thing. 1 die for the Italians, hoping to gain a 5 or a 6. They've got a 4. Okay, the Italian political Situation is deteriorating and they are now unstable. Okay, one more fail and they'll move to the collapse. Okay, next chit. Actually, do you know what? We're going to interrupt, and the Americans are going to interrupt because they are a non-fascist power, and they can use their political action to try to remove that Japanese trade agreement. So it'll be 2 dice, 5s and 6s, and that's a fail. So we'll just pop an American cube in the special actions box here so that it can be attempted next time. Next chip. That is a British offensive, which is a military action. We could deploy, we could build, because we... okay, what could we do with a build? Let's just build a land army. Just straight into the cup. We've still got quite a lot of counters into the cup. Video's probably going to need to pause soon. But let's roll with what we've got. So we have a political action for the Germans. Okie dokie. So Germany. What are they going to do? They want to get some resources. Very much want to get some resources. They've got effectiveness of 3. I think it's time to try to get some more temporary resources. Now Benelux, I think Benelux will end up in a, if we did a diplomatic action for Benelux, we would end up in a situation where the army and the resistance fist, which you may or may not be able to see, Benelux is just here, there's a little fist, those two combined will mean we will need to roll basically 7, which is not possible at the moment, so then maybe we won't be able to do anything there. Czechoslovakia, we would need to roll again the same number, and Poland. So I think if we're going to do any kind of diplomacy action, we're going to go into Scandinavia again, which would give us a decent bit of control point down that side, but it may be worth us just trying to take Poland, or more likely Benelux now while we can. That'll provoke just about everybody, but that would be a good opportunity to get that resource while we can. Let's do that. We will need to basically what we're doing is we're using a political action to perform a military action, but we, rather than just going ahead and doing it like we would do in a typical military action when we draw those arrows from the cup, we have to pass the effectiveness check first. So it's a 5 or a 6. We've got that, which means we can now roll our units into Benelux. Not necessarily the best time, because we don't have an air force, so this is like the slowest, most land-based blitzkrieg ever, but we're going to give it a go. We've got 2 units going in. We will have baseline 2 for both sides. There's no tank superiority or air superiority. Is there anything for that resistance fist? Let's double check the rules, shall we? Or the play rate at least. No, there doesn't appear to be. So this is actually probably not a sensible idea at all for the Germans. We're just getting itchy feet to get to the combat, I think. Right, rolling the dice. And that is a draw, effectively. Okay, that's a draw. Right, what happens when it's a draw? Good question. So that's, don't know. Let me check the rules. Okay, so if the scores are tied, neither side wins. Both sides take a loss and cannot retreat. The side that loses the combat must take a number of losses equal to the winner's score, but well, that's part of the normal game. Okay, so we have a single loss for both sides. Now in the aftermath, because we've got 2 units in there, so basically the Benelux army goes, they are now out of the game. The Germans lose a land army. However, because during the aftermath we have to see if there's any land units remaining. There are no land units of the defending side remaining, but there is of the attacking side, meaning the attacker has actually conquered that area. Okay, cool. Not perhaps in the most efficient or successful way, but Germany have now got the Benelux countries under their control. That's another VP. And definitely a provocation against the areas with interest in that region, which in this case will be, as you might expect, the French and the British. Okay, so again, the French cannot take that, but the British can, so the British will place it on there, ready for probably some kind of alliance or something. We'll see what happens. Do we want to interrupt right now? Oh, that's a good question. We could do. Need to adjust those points first. Okay, okie dokie. So, we're not at war because we haven't attacked a playable faction. We're not at war. We've just done something a little bit naughty, as it were. So, do the British and French want to try to get into that alliance now? I think we should, don't you? Right, that's both flags being removed, and then we have a +3 DRM to whatever the die roll is. I'm looking for 5s and 6s, but it's the French effectiveness, so it's just the 1 die. So basically you're looking at a 2+, no, not a 2+, yeah, 2+. We've got a 2, so we are now allied as the British and the French. So that means that when the almost inevitable expansion of Germany into France happens, the British can send their expeditionary force to try and help. Okay, what's next? Possible interrupt from the Japanese, but no, let's not do that. We do need to just remove those French cubes. Okay. The alliance will provoke Germany, though. Absolutely will provoke Germany, and I think it provokes Italy as well. Okay, that is true. The Italians will take Il Duce, and the Germans will just place a flag, and they'll both place those onto the reserve. Okay, that seems like a pretty good time to end this particular video. We are looking at what's in the cup. Halfway, maybe slightly less, through the turn. The Germans are allied, the British and French are allied, and we have some expansion in the Chinese region for the Soviets. Okay, that seems like a good place to stop. The tensions are now coming to a head, and we will see what happens from here. Thanks for watching. See you for the next one.